December 29th, 2023. A bank teller makes one phone call that changes everything. What seemed like an easy payday for a group of scammers turned into a nightmare when police showed up at the perfect moment. This is the story of how overconfidence, multiple bank visits, and one sharp-eyed teller brought down an entire check fraud operation. The call that started it all. On December 29th, 2023, officers were dispatched to a bank after a teller called police and reported that a group of people were attempting to cash a fraudulent check. What the suspects didn't know was that they'd already been flagged. This wasn't their first stop that day, it was their fourth. And this time, police were waiting. The initial confrontation. A woman named Somaya walks into the bank holding what she believes is a legitimate check. The teller greets her politely, but something's off. "So I have this information here that's not matching on our system. I understand you've been to other branches too. So we just wanted to..." "What's going on?" Somaya tries to play it cool. "Hi, I got that check from my employer." The officer asks for her ID. She hands over her identification, claiming she's visiting family from New York. But when asked about her employer, Somaya starts stumbling. First, she says it's from her employer. Then she says it's a rent check. The story keeps changing, and the officer notices immediately. The car that wasn't there. The officer asks what kind of car she drove. "A white Civic," Somaya replies. The officer radios his partner to check the parking lot. Moments later, the response comes back. "There's no Civic out here in the parking lot." Somaya starts getting nervous. "You guys are making me nervous," she says. But the officer stays calm, asking again about her employer. "Who's your employer? What do you do for work?" Finally, Somaya gives an answer. "I'm a receptionist." "Where do you work?" "In New York." But it's too vague, too rehearsed. And then comes the moment that changes everything. The officer leans in. "You want to just tell me what's going on? Obviously, I'm not stupid. You know what I mean?" Somaya knows she's caught. "Yeah, I know you're not stupid." The officer continues. "Well, the car that you came in with just got stopped by the state police trying to leave. Her friends had abandoned her. They'd driven off the moment they sensed trouble, leaving Somaya alone to face the consequences." "Who issued the check?" The officer keeps pressing. "So, again, who is your employer that cut you the check?" Somaya stays silent. The officer tries again. "By who?" More silence. It shouldn't be too hard of a question, right? But Somaya won't or can't answer. She knows that giving up a name means betraying whoever gave her the check. And in the world of check fraud schemes, snitches don't last long. The officer finally tells her to hang tight while he speaks with the bank teller to understand exactly what they're dealing with. How the bank caught the fraud. The bank teller explains the situation to the officer. "I have 3 branches tell me that she tried to go to their location and cash the check, and we've already checked that out of that account. So we can tell it's a counterfeit check." The officer asks how they identified it as fake. The teller breaks it down. "We look at images of recently cashed items, and it doesn't match anything. The signature is not a match. So that tells us it's counterfeit." The teller pulls up a legitimate check from the same account and prints it for comparison. The differences are obvious. The signature looks traced. The security features are in the wrong spot. The check number is out of sequence. "She might have gotten away with it at any other location," the teller admits, "but not here." This teller had been trained to spot the red flags, and Somaya's check failed every test. The confrontation continues. The officer returns to Somaya with the evidence. "What they're telling me is that you've been to a couple other M&T banks already trying to cash checks, and they turned you away, and they notified other banks, and that this is a different signature than the typical ones on the account, and that the security features are different as well, and that it's out of order, so it's a bad check." Somaya realizes she's cornered. But before the conversation can continue, she pulls out her phone. The officer immediately stops her. "We're done with the phone right now. Why are you doing that?" "You're done with the phone. You can either put it down or I can take it as evidence. What do you want to do?" Somaya tries to protest, but the officer is firm. "If you pull out the phone again, I'm going to take it as evidence." "Okay, I promise you that." Why? Because the last thing police need is for Somaya to warn her accomplices about what's happening. The search. The officer asks Samaya to empty her pockets. She pulls out AirPods and her phone. The officer conducts a quick pat-down with his flashlight to ensure she's not carrying additional fraudulent checks. I'm just going to keep this for the time being. We'll get this back to you. Okay, I'm going to see what the investigating officer is going to do. Samaya feels tricked. You told me if I put it away, I didn't touch it. But the officer explains he was simply conducting a search to ensure she wasn't carrying more evidence. I'm not here to trick you. I'm trying to be straight with you. I'm being honest with you. The driver's story. Meanwhile, outside the bank, state police have stopped the car that drops Samaya off. The driver tries to explain why he left. No, I was going to use the bathroom. I still have to use the bathroom right now, but I had to get gas. If you see my gas is on 40, I got 40, 30 miles. So I was actually ready to drive home, but she was taking pretty long. But I didn't know why, I didn't speak to her, I didn't know why she was taking long. The excuse sounds rehearsed, convenient. The officer isn't buying it. So you just left her there because you were going to go get gas? Yeah, but I was coming right back. She has a phone, so it's not like I was going to leave her in Connecticut, But the timing was too perfect. The moment trouble started, the driver conveniently needed gas. The evidence inside the car. When officers search the vehicle, they find exactly what they expected. A bunch of blank paper, printed checks, all the same, unfilled out, with the same signature. And then they got a bunch of ripped checks. Sorry, you also have the Clorox and stuff too. The wash checks back here. This wasn't just a one-time scam. This was an organized operation. The group had been washing legitimate checks, using chemicals like Clorox to erase the original information, and then reprinting them with new amounts and payee names. It's a common check fraud scheme, but one that carries serious federal charges. More information from the bank. The bank teller returns with more damaging information. So I actually got a little bit more information also. The employee requested about the actual customer. So I talked to the branch that's in Coventry, and the person that was in here did successfully cash a check at their branch. This means the scammers had already gotten away with at least one fraudulent transaction. The teller provides a copy of the check that cleared at Coventry, along with the account holder's information. The officer asks, "Are you able to see how many times they were able to successfully cash checks?" This is the only transaction. One successful fraud. But how many more banks had they planned to hit before the day was over? Pressing charges. The officer asks the bank if they want to press charges. Yeah, I would. So especially because she got away with that. The teller agrees to testify if needed. Sure. The officer thanks the teller for calling so quickly. Of course. Thanks for calling. We've never been successful. Yeah, it's tough, but we just see so much of it, and it's really frustrating because it's a really negative impact on our customers, and we know to see it. So thank you. Check fraud has become an epidemic. Banks lose millions every year to schemes just like this one, and for every scammer caught, there are dozens more still operating. The driver's code. Back in the police car, the driver makes it clear he won't cooperate. I'm not a snitch. I'm not none of that. I'm a man for the other people you're with. Yeah, I'm not making the case work. I'm not going to say anything to put anybody else in more hot water. I'm a real man, so I'm going to stand on what I say. I need a lawyer. He then mentions someone promising him a record deal. He's saying that he's going to get a record deal he was working for Warner. He's going to get work for Universal for records and music and stuff. So what the hell are we doing? Seriously, man. It's a common tactic used by scam ringleaders. Promise young recruits fame, money, and success if they just help with one job. The reality? They end up with criminal records while the person at the top disappears. The charges. The suspects were all charged with conspiracy to commit larceny and a felony count of forgery. Conspiracy to commit larceny means they work together to steal money through deception. The forgery charge comes from creating and attempting to use fraudulent checks. Depending on the amount involved and their criminal history, each suspect could face years in prison. How check fraud schemes work. Check fraud operations like this one typically follow a pattern. First, scammers obtain legitimate checks, either by stealing mail, burglarizing homes, or buying them on the dark web. Then they wash the checks using chemicals to remove the original ink, leaving only the signature and account information. Next, they reprint the checks with new amounts and payee names. Finally, they recruit money mules, people who cash the checks at various banks, usually for a small cut of the profits. These operations are sophisticated and well organized. The people cashing the checks are often the lowest level participants, taking all the risk while the organizers stay safely in the background. Why they got caught? So what went wrong for Samaya and her crew? First, they got greedy. Hitting 4 different branches of the same bank in one day is a massive red flag. Banks communicate with each other, especially when fraud is suspected. Second, the checks themselves were poorly made. The security features didn't match. The signatures were traced. The check numbers were out of sequence. A well-trained teller could spot the problems immediately. Third, they had no exit strategy. When things went wrong, the driver panicked and fled, leaving Somaya behind. A smarter crew would have had a coordinated plan for exactly this scenario. And finally, they underestimated law enforcement. They thought they could hit multiple banks without consequences. They were wrong. The bigger picture. This case represents a tiny fraction of the check fraud epidemic affecting America. According to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, check fraud reports increased by 23% in 2023 alone. Banks lose hundreds of millions of dollars every year, but the real victims are often everyday people whose accounts are compromised, whose identities are stolen, and whose financial lives are turned upside down by criminals they've never met. Conclusion. What started as what the scammers thought would be an easy payday ended with handcuffs, felony charges, and years of potential prison time. Samaya walked into that bank thinking she'd walk out with cash. Instead, she walked out in custody. The driver thought he could play dumb and avoid consequences. He couldn't. And whoever was at the top of this operation, promising record deals and easy money, they're probably already recruiting the next group of desperate people willing to risk everything for a cut of stolen funds. This case serves as a warning. Check fraud isn't a victimless crime. It destroys lives, bankrupts families, and leaves permanent criminal records. And thanks to vigilant bank tellers and quick responding police, these scammers learned that lesson the hard way.